Look, we've all seen it and never questioned it. This is the root of why so many kids nowadays are obese, and I blame the US government. In this video, I'm not just gonna be roasting this scheme, but also show you how I'd make my own version supported on actual data. The Food Pyramid is a world-known diet guide, so you might be more familiar with this version, or this one, or this one, or this one. But let's take it back to the start. In 1992, the USDA published the first ever food pyramid, and I'm gonna break each layer down. The bottom part is occupied with carb sources. All sorts of them. Didn't matter if it was oatmeal or Cocoa Pops. On the next layer were fruits and veggies separated in their own block. Higher up were animal products and dairy. Now, can you guess what these dots represent? They're fats, oils, and sweets as the thing to stay away from at all costs. So why did the USDA decide to put fats all the way up to be used sparingly, while recommending 6 to 11 servings of cereal? To understand it, we need to look back at what was happening in America in 1980. If you picture the average American, he was overweight and a heavy smoker. The researchers knew they needed to do something about it, so when they published a study confirming a correlation between smoking and lung cancer, smoking rates dropped fast. They wanted the same to happen with obesity rates, but failed. Why? The researchers' goal was to reach as many people as possible, even if that meant sacrificing the truth. They knew that not all carbs and fats were created equal, and that we needed some fat in our diets to survive. But the message they put out was, carbs good, fats bad. When the pyramid was published, the low-fat products skyrocketed in popularity. This led to a decreased fat intake in the general population, but not what the USDA wanted. Obesity rates kept on rising. What they were left with was a poorly educated nation, scared of fats, and eager to eat more cereal and white bread. The obesity problem became even more serious when people got office jobs and started living a sedentary lifestyle. Since 2011, the government chose MyPlate to make nutritional recommendations, so they gave us this. Pretty cool, right? Because it's not a pyramid, it's a much better fit for food choices, as it does not prioritize any food over the other. But there's one more issue I don't like about it. Unlike the older one, this one doesn't recommend food portions, so should people just be blindly guessing how much they eat? We all know that one guy who says,
"How much you eat doesn't matter, bro. Only what you eat does."
This is a very minimalistic mindset, as it ignores energy balance, aka the most important component of any diet. The truth is that it doesn't matter if you only eat whole foods and have a perfect ratio between them. If you're dangerously obese, it's in your best interest to cut anything out from your diet in order to lose weight. This is a very extreme case because obese people tend to make worse food choices, so we can't really split these factors, but still, I believe we shouldn't only be educating children on food choices, but also on calories and reading food labels. It's the only solution for our generation who will under any condition create an excuse for why they're not in shape. This is called an echo chamber, where people with similar thinking just confirm each other's opinions without seeing the bigger picture. So moral of the story, the government doesn't really care about your health as long as you're paying taxes. Getting in shape is in your hands and in your hands only. Now I want to share how I'd create my own nutrition scheme, and spoiler alert, it's not a pyramid. Just a quick disclaimer, this is not meant for bodybuilding, as the order of layers would change when we're talking physique development. You couldn't really call this a shape because there's more of them, so why not start at the bottom? The floor represents your calorie intake and your energy balance. This whole thing is built in a way that it breaks down if the bottom is not stable. Similarly, how nothing really matters if you missed your calorie intake. A common example would be someone trying to lose weight but eating in a surplus, and the opposite, someone who tries to gain weight but they're simply not eating enough. People then get the question of how many calories should they eat. However, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. The most important thing would be your height to body weight ratio, because your body weight is in a linear relationship with calories needed to maintain it. There's a pretty wide range for what is considered healthy at a given height, so you should find yourself somewhere in this chart over here. Other factors would be your daily physical activity, aka what kind of job and lifestyle you have, your exercise regime, muscle mass, because it's a metabolically active tissue, so the more you have, the more calories you need to maintain it. Your gender, aka the combination of hormonal and muscle mass differences, leads to males burning a bit more calories at the same body weight as females. Your age, as past 40, the older you get, the fewer calories you burn, but this mostly comes from losing muscle mass. If you want to know how many calories you need to maintain your body weight, the best thing to do would be going to a calorie calculator and entering your stats. It's an equation that'll give you a pretty rough estimate of how much you should be eating, but the fine-tuning is up to you. For example, if the app tells you you need 2,900 calories to maintain your body weight, but you actually only need about 2,600, you might fall into a 300 calorie surplus until you reach a body weight where 2,900 becomes your maintenance. The general rule of thumb is as long as you stay in that healthy weight interval, you don't have to worry about opposing health risks by losing or gaining weight. Let's move on to the next structure, which represents food composition, aka what kind of foods are we consuming. It's comprised of 4 elements: carb, protein, fat, and micronutrient sources. It's simply a question of whether you're eating oats or cornflakes, olive oil or sunflower oil, soy or chicken breast. What's interesting is that the sources of macros actually matter more than how much of them you're getting. Again, for health, not physique development. That's because your body can create most nutrients by itself when it has available calories. But the point is, focusing on quality foods is the next step after calorie balance. Now we know that some sources are better than others when trying to improve health, so let's go through them one by one. Firstly, we've got protein sources. All of them can be ranked on their amino acid profile. So how many of the human body's amino acids do they contain? Some have all 20, which are called complete sources. Others have a few missing, so we call them incomplete sources. There'd also be something in between where the missing amino acids in one protein can be found in another one. These are called complementary sources, and a good example would be rice and beans. They can also be ranked by their digestibility, meaning some will digest completely for your body to use them, while others have a portion that just escapes through the system. Research has found that animal products usually have a high digestibility score of around 95%, while plant sources have a score of around 80%. Thankfully, we can measure this stuff and make actual rankings based on these 2 criteria. So here's a table with protein quality and digestibility scores. Milk and egg proteins score a perfect 1, while some plant proteins score up to 50% less. The last criteria is micronutrient density, where the animal products come out on top again by having a higher concentration of vitamin B12 and iron. The practical takeaway would be getting your protein from animal products or complementary sources for vegans. How about carbs? We also have 3 different criteria. Number 1, the glycemic index, which measures how fast the food is digested and transferred to your blood as glucose. Does this matter for health? Well, not really. It's just that the lower glycemic foods tend to score better in other criteria, so you could call them superior. They also provide stable energy levels, which support mental abilities, which is a plus in my book, even if it's not health related. Criteria number 2, micronutrient and fiber amount. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Some foods are gonna have more micronutrients than others, and fiber amount is also noteworthy, as of its health benefits of lowering cholesterol and controlling glucose. By the way, did you know that your body cannot digest fiber, so your bacteria in your large intestine do? Criteria number 3, satiety index. It's a scale of what carb source keeps you full or hungry after eating. Here's an example of how different foods match up. And as you can see, most fruits and veggies are at the top, while the junk is at the bottom. That's why people can't stop eating them. What's interesting is that in nearly every case, the healthy carbs always check off all 3 criteria, so make sure you emphasize whole grains, fruits, and veggies. And lastly, we got fat. There are 3 different types of fat based on its molecular structure. We've got trans fats, which are cancerogenic and have a pretty negative effect on health, so recommended intake is minimal. Then we got saturated fats, which are found in animal products. They're not bad for health, but overconsumption has been shown to be linked with a little worse health outcomes in certain individuals. And lastly, unsaturated fats, which could further be split into mono and polyunsaturated. You can find them in plant sources, and they have documented the best health outcomes by far. There's also a recommended ratio between these types of fat, and it should look something like this. So focusing on getting the fat from nuts and olive oil would be best for staying alive. You might be asking yourself, is junk food a source on its own? Well, not really. So let's define it as food with low nutritional value. So when all daily intakes are covered, you don't have to worry about a Big Mac damaging your body. It only becomes an issue where people start to prioritize junk food over real sources. If you have these 2 layers covered, then you've done like 80% of the work for your health. But in some extreme cases, some people fail to reach this 3rd level, and it might even cause death. I'm talking about macronutrient amounts. In order to ensure health and survival, we need a minimum intake of proteins and fats in our diet, even if you have food composition and calorie balance dialed into the gram, because not consuming enough protein or fat can be life-threatening. To be honest, If you're like me and have a crippling obsession with working out and eating healthy, then you might find these recommendations pretty funny. So for protein, the average moderately active person needs about, wait for it, 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. This is crazy in my opinion. Like, I'm shooting for 5x this amount. So if you have problems eating enough protein to stay alive, then I'm convinced your diet consists of table sugar and olive oil. There's one caveat for vegans, as their protein sources are usually worse in quality, so they might need up to 0.45 grams per pound of body weight. You might ask yourself, is there an upper limit to protein intake? AKA an amount that might cause damage to your kidneys, like your mom says. From the limited research we have, the answer is probably not. But again, this video applies for healthy people and not someone with kidney issues, as you might have different needs or upper limits. Let's move on to fats. Similarly to protein, there are some types which the body cannot make on its own, specifically omega-3 and omega-6 unsaturated ones. The problem we're facing now is that no one has done any research regarding lower limits of fat intake. And that's because people who have this problem usually tend to have other insufficiencies like protein or certain micronutrients as well. In our obesity epidemic, undereating fat is incredibly rare. However, from the limited research we have on this topic, about 40 to 50 grams a day, depending how heavy you are, will be enough to satisfy your body's needs for survival. So back to the two essential fats. People usually don't have any issues consuming enough omega-6, as there are a lot of vegetable oils present in our diet. The problem is omega-3 consumption, which we get from fish oils and nuts. How about over-consuming fats? Is it bad for health? Well, kinda. Depends on which ones are we talking about. Trans fats? Yes. Saturated fats? Pretty sure, yeah. Unsaturated fats? If you control calorie balance, food composition, protein and carb intake, then you don't have to worry about filling the rest of your available calories up with unsaturated fats, as they have logged the best health outcomes. I also wanted to touch on carbs, as even if they're not essential, they still provide many benefits to the consumer. Firstly, they are the preferred source of the brain. They supply fiber, which is only found in carb sources, and its benefits are too many to count. And they supply vitamins and minerals, so if you cut carbs out, you might be risking deficiencies in those particular micronutrients. As you can see, in spite of being non-essential, the carbs benefits are still noteworthy. Again, as long as protein and fat minima are met, filling up the rest of your daily calories with any macro would be considered healthy. This was the bulk of my diet scheme, so at the top would be the little things like meal timing and hydration, which I'll cover in my next video. So if you made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching, and until next time, see you guys.